to our regional system that will result in higher diversion and more recycling. So that's essentially the answer there. Well, maybe it's a several-part question.
Yeah,
And the
answer the
second
part.
being whether or not the facility would accept source-separated single-stream or zero-sort material. And that practice in the region, movement to zero-sort, is catching on. There's more municipalities in the region that are taking, that are implementing that type of program. And so we wanted to have a facility in place again that was complementary to good local practice. And I'll have Craig explain from a process standpoint.
Yeah, if you look at the process flow diagram, the top part is what we call is a single stream recycling plant. So the sorting of plastics, metals is done by magnets, optic sort, vacuums, density separation. That's what you would see in any normal MRF, a material recovery facility. So we're actually building that as part of the system. So what that means is that there will be new infrastructure in this part of the country to accept zero sort, which currently the closest one is down towards Portland, isn't it?
Yeah, Lewiston.
In Lewiston. So what that means is that the communities with their recycling will have a lot less distance to transport it and should save them a significant amount of money. It is fundamentally cheaper for us to run material through that bit than through all four of the processes. So whatever fees we charge or rebates we give will be incentivized towards source-separated recyclables. So there is the incentive to do that. Now, when you go into food waste, we may consider doing a different fee structure for food waste, but we can't make it such that it will likely not obviate the cost of the additional collection in the first place. So we've got to look at all of these different elements, but fundamentally, we're able to handle source-separated recycling and charge differently for it. There's a question, the next one, about education to encourage towns to source-separate and remove toxics. Fundamentally, we don't want the darn things. I mean, I don't want, mercury, and I don't want people's, leftover Roundup and things like that. I mean, we've designed systems to be able to handle them, but it's much better to get them out in the first place.
Well, and we have, like in the case of mercury, we have a good set of laws on the books that bans those types of materials from entering the waste stream. Unfortunately, despite the appropriate policy framework, compliance is another question. Inevitably, society being society, you're going to find some of these materials that will ultimately enter the waste stream. So our role, I think, is from the standpoint of education, and what all of us who are interested in having the best recycling and waste management system possible, what can we do collectively in the way of public education to discourage the entry of mercury-added products, for example, into the waste stream? And our hope is that perhaps there's a role to collaborate with those interested, including MRC perhaps, to make the system improvements that we deserve here in the region.
Well, I'm going to give you another example again of things that are in your trash. Go back a generation and there was probably no textiles in the waste stream. Right now, textiles are rising 6+% of the waste stream, and that's because clothes are so darn cheap, because we bring them in from China. And when you just throw your clothes out and they get contaminated with food waste, it's almost impossible to get them to any kind of value. And the best value, if you remember, going back several generations, a ragman would come around and actually pick them up. And they used to make paper from old clothing. And I would dearly love to work with someone like MRCN to set up a system to get textiles out of the waste stream, if it's all possible, because they're actually worth really good money if they can be pulled out and kept separate. So these are the things that we're going to be working on with some of the communities to try and get to a better focus of what comes to us.
I think MRC MRC is the right platform to coordinate this education across 180 communities.
Good point. The question about a single stream facility more efficient at processing recycled commodities than a dirty MRF? Yes, it is. That's why we're putting a single stream facility in, and we're not a dirty MRF. Dirty MRF is just big long lines, some machinery, and a bunch of people picking through trash. And I never had that in my design because I never wanted to do that. So we do have that single stream. There was a question about how many people we plan to employ, and are they upper level, lower level, and so on and so forth. 65 to 70 is the current goal, depending on the final tonnage that we end up with. It's 2 shifts on the front end, and the back end runs 24/7. Now, the noise for people nearby, the amount, we've done a study on the likely decibels at nighttime. Cricket should be louder than our plant at nighttime because the amount of trees between us and you. But how are we doing on that?
Yeah, as far as Dennis spoke earlier, there's quite a depth to the wooded buffer between the facility and the nearest residential area. As a rule, we can expect to lose between 5 to 8 decibels for every 100 feet of wooded buffer. So even if there's even if it's 3,000 feet of woods left over, we're still talking about 150 decibel loss over that distance, just from the amount of trees in place. So we're looking at a really large reduction there, and should not have any real major impact at all to the near residential.
I guess
On the decibel level, like, what do you think it will be like during the day compared to at night?
Again, I don't think anything should hit 150 decibels because that is dangerous. But what we would generally experience, the loudest thing going on will be backup alarms from the trucks and the wheel loaders and things like that. Do you know how many decibels they produce?
I believe those are typically 80-ish, somewhere in that ballpark.
Right.
Those aren't regulated by DEP, the backup alarms themselves. All the DEP regulates are the internals of the building and that sort of thing. But we have to be below 70 decibels during the daytime for those operations.
60 at night.
And 60 at nighttime, that's correct.
I mean, I guess I'm just curious, I do live on Main Trail, and my property might be the one that you measured to, but as far as like Speedway 95, I'd be curious to know what their decibel level is, just for comparison, because there are times you can actually hear the announcer
Right.
when it's summertime and the windows are open,
Yeah.
and so I'm just curious to get a,
But unlike an industrial process is regulated under DEP, those don't have regulations under DEP. Doesn't have a standard for, I can hear Speedway, whatever it is at my house, along with the concerts sometimes, but
Right.
those don't have regulations
okay.
like the industrial standards, so they exceed.
So the loudest thing that we've ever is the backups, and that's generally during the day. The next loudest thing is actually when the trucks don't, it hits the floor, that's inside. And that again will be during the day. The rest of it is not that loud. I mean, you come to our facility, you really don't need ear protection in our facility. No. It's just pumps and, process, kind of like a paper mill.
So would there be time limitations on when they operated and could dispose of waste in the evening? Did we talk about that? You can't
Good
dispose.
question, though.
Well, typically, I mean, what we've done as a plan on it, I mean, it's generally 6 to 6,
Okay.
5 days, and 6 to 2 on Saturday. But yeah, but typically after 6 at night, right, there won't be any delivery vehicles back in.
The process is designed to run 2 shifts, so during the day, and then the rest of it runs 24/7, but we deal with the waste during the daylight hours.
The delivery of waste is only during the daylight hours,
Correct.
and we cap those hours.
Correct, we're not bringing anything out of state, so it's all gonna be, local stuff. So I did digress, but back to the job. So, base pay, everything's living wage, so the entry-level positions, I think it's gonna be about 40% entry-level, maybe 35 supervisory, and then the balance will be managerial and technical. And so package around $45,000 a year for entry level with health insurance, $60,000 a year for the supervisory, and there's quite a few scientific and managerials north of 100,000. And what we're looking for is, the question was, will you prioritize hiring people from PERC? Well, I'm not going to make that absolute promise, because we're also looking for people with pulp and paper experience, because that, a lot of our process is, and that's one of the reasons that Maine makes some sense, is a lot of people here know how to wash fibers, how to deal with the kinds of things that we're dealing with. So, yeah, we will advertise first in the local community, is what I will say, and we will pick, we'll choose the best candidates who come to us. There is also going to be a crossover, because we need to be operational December 31st, 2017, so we're ready, and PERC will still be running, so we've got to get everyone trained up, so there is some issue with that one too. But that's our plan. Next one. Okay. Can fibers from organics process be used in soils that grow food? We're not producing compost, and that's not the best soil use for cellulosic fibers. They take a while to break down anyway. It's much better in our mind to digest them, make sugars, and digest the gas, which is in hot demand here in the wintertime particularly. The regards about the 150,000 tons to be economically viable, I don't think we said that. I think we said that is kind of that's the minimum guarantee, was 150. 180 is, 185 is the current generation. So the question was, well, what happens if all these communities start recycling more, or the recyclables to us is the same as the waste. So if we get the recyclables because we've got the infrastructure, that counts. And then also
But we didn't structure the economics of the system that we're depending upon any level of source separated organics being delivered to source separated recyclables. If it works out locally, they do come in, great, we'll be prepared to handle it, but we're not dependent, economically, to be viable.
But let's just say, for example, there's 187 communities joined forces here, and this site is kind of right in the center of all the population. That's why we're here. Let's say one community decided we want to go zero waste, and they set that as a community goal, and they produced no waste. Well, because MRC is aggregating all 187 communities, it doesn't overly affect that overall guarantee. So that's the advantage of working through MRC. So really, I guess the last two questions with regard to signing up the other towns and the landfill, I'm going to pass over to you as well.
Yeah, the question being, have we reached out to our member communities about post-2018? Clearly, yes, regularly and extensively. We've designed this project around all the municipalities that have relied on PERC through the years. And so there are a small number of communities that have historically relied on PERC, but never signed a charter municipality waste disposal agreement. Those folks would be welcome in the mix post-2018. And then finally, might there be other communities, a handful here in Maine that have never used PERC, but might for some reason find it advantageous to join someday. We've historically had an open door policy with regard to new members, so I expect that we would entertain discussion with anyone that may come along that's interested. And the primary purpose of the project is to continue to serve the municipalities that have historically relied on the PERC facility for waste disposal.
But that's not to say that others might leave too. I mean, some municipalities may not join us.
Yeah, our service area is large. We're as far north as Municipal, central of Worcester County, which is located 20 miles from a licensed secure landfill. Might they wish to avoid 180 miles one way in transportation? I would expect they're probably going to look at that quite closely. So yes, there could be, we may have several in the system that it's in their interest to leave. They may well be replaced by others that have never been charter municipalities or have never used the plant. But we expect generally it'll be roughly the same amount of MSW than the aggregate, you know, that we historically have serviced. So, the second part, a deadline for contract signed with Fiberight moving forward. Our schedule for working with the municipalities to sign waste disposal agreements for the project will start in January of 2016. It'll run through town meeting season, you know, out through May, June. And we expect, and again, I speak from experience because we went through this in 1998, when we signed a 20-year contract extension and all the charter municipalities had to go through town meeting season, sign up. We missed some through traditional town meeting season, and we had to have the deadline period extend out to September 30th of 1998. So it's roughly a 9-month process altogether, signing up the municipalities to extensions. So we're looking at a 9-month process roughly this time, so we expect the deadline will be somewhere between September 1 and October 1 next year, 2016. And that should be about the point in time that the transaction closes and construction commences. Okay. Finally, the question about whether or not we evaluated other types of facilities and technologies before settling on the Fiberight project. There's probably more detail in the written answer than I'll get into, but just generally, we did initiate a request for expression of interest for solid waste management technologies, and we didn't limit the approach or type of technology. And what that resulted in was receipt of 15 proposals from a wide variety of solid waste management technologies from around the world. And we systematically reviewed all 15 proposals and continued to narrow the field until we found the technology that stood out above all others and represented the best fit for the needs of this region. And that technology was Fiberight technology. And so at that point, I guess that would have been back about 9 months ago, and we've been working in earnest together ever since to continue to bring amounts to a rather complex project and program together to continue to serve the needs of the region in the post-2018 period.
That's all the formal questions. So informally, and again, I reserve the right, really because I don't want to say something that's wrong, to get back to people if you can really take some notes. Oh, we are being recorded. Did you get a copy of this? No, pass this one around.
I've got a copy.
Oh, you got one?
Sure.
Good.
So this is
You asked-
on,
Yeah, go on.
I have other copies. This is on the tax credit. Should I make more copies?
This actually, I looked at all the whole notion of RINs. This is the renewable identification numbers and the renewable fuel standard. And so what happens is when we produce digester gas, we're actually going to be shipping it into the pipeline and selling it as transportation fuel. We are in negotiation, and it looks like they're going to install the infrastructure for a CNG filling station at or near the site. So what we will be planning to do is that 60% of the trucks that come in as transfer trailers is to convert them from diesel to CNG, which is much cleaner. We've already got the trucks driving through Hamden, much cleaner than diesel and quieter as well. We get it's called a credit, which we sell as part of the renewable fuel standard. And that credit is variable. It is subject to what's called a renewable volume obligation, which comes out every year, and it's volatile. So the more money we get off that particular credit, which is not paid by the government, it's actually oil companies have to buy enough true renewable fuel to meet an obligation, the more the rebate is. I mean, that's essentially how we've got this thing structured, is that we do well, the communities do well. But if, for example, it goes away in its entirety, one of the things we have up here is that there is a core fundamental value of diesel fuel, and 7.81 gallons of diesel fuel per million BTUs of gas. We produce very clean gas, which will be consumed very close to the plant. There's literally a pipe. And then secondly, in the wintertime, we're negotiating with Bangor Gas right now for direct pipeline injection, and the pipe that goes through our site at a discount to the purchase price of gas off Algonquin Gate. Now, you all well know the cost of energy in Maine is the highest in the country in the wintertime. The price that we sell to Bangor Gas will be a matter of public record, and that should pass directly to you in savings. Certainly, we bring in 400,000 MCF of distributed gas to the region, which was not there before, so it does move the dial somewhat. So, given that the value of gas is higher in the wintertime here, if the renewable fuel standard goes away completely, the project still survives, it still makes money. And depending on other market conditions, that's going to drive the rebates we pay to the communities. And this was just one, there's many examples. This is one I found was one of the better ones that I saw on the web, of a kind of a primer of what is the renewable fuel standard, what does it do, and you know, what are the prices been per gallon. So all of this stuff is going to be public knowledge. It all drives into the rebate formula. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Otherwise, and feel free to email me directly if you have any holes in that. We have any other questions?
Are you opening it up?
Yeah.
My name is Mark Robinson, I live on the Main Trail. My wife and I have lived there for 20 years, and I've visited and trapped that area extensively over the last 20 years. So on your initial inspection of that property, your subsequent inspections, how many vernal pools have you identified?
Several. I don't have a number on top of my head. It is being quantified right now. During the vernal, so you asked about initial versus where we're going now?
No, just your initial inspection and subsequently you've probably been on the property multiple times.
Yes. Yeah, so the initial inspection, it was in the fall, so it's not the best time to look at the significance of vernal pools, but we did some initial inspection. There's several vernal pools. Most of Maine has vernal pools in it. We are currently in the midst of the peak vernal pool season, so we're out there counting eggs and doing all the science that's necessary to demonstrate the project meets the standards. If you're pretty familiar with the site, the site gets wetter down towards this. There's standing water down here. So there's several vernal pools in this area and several vernal pools in this area. This area up here has continued to demonstrate pretty dry area. It's upland, and there was no vernal pools. I can't remember the distance, but it's mostly here and here. And then there's vernal pools along the road as well.
My second question has to do with the Maine Fish and Game. Have you involved them in this project in regards to the proximity of this facility and the deer wintering habitat?
Yes. Yeah, we've gotten documentation from them. It'll be in the application again. And we don't have a graphic that shows it.
No.
So that deer, they identify in a general sense where deer wintering area is, and there's a pretty big area if you've seen the mapping.
Yep.
So we had them out there, again, looking at our proposed area. And at the time, we met with them, we hadn't figured that this is the best place, but in general, this site, they said based on their inspection that the current habitat in this area does not justify a deer wintering area. Now, they were interested in some preservation of deer wintering area down in this area where it's more likely that deer wintering is occurring. So that is an official a public document that will be part of the filing.
This is my first chance to attend one of these meetings. I want to compliment you on your thoroughness of information. Having been a resident in this area for an extended period of time, my main concern is the watershed on this project, because it is, and subsequently goes down into the lowlands. The watershed of this area goes through Main Trail through a stream from this property and subsequently all the way to the North Scott River. So I think it's prudent to move cautiously and to identify everything that could go wrong, because the impacts are absolutely tremendous.
That's a very good point. So what is the requirement? Because obviously what we're looking to do is not emit anything. I mean, now, stormwater runoff is one thing. I mean, to the extent there's any oil on the asphalt, processed water, no. I mean, there's no way that we're going to, and we need to be sure, and I'm sure DEQ is going to require us to have secondary containment around the site. What are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is the latest site plan. You can look at it in a little more detail after the meeting maybe, but we have to comply with the state stormwater rules, and I think that's probably the biggest source of pollution to the watershed, as you're talking about the stormwater that falls on the site. So these shaded regions right here, and the state rules have just gotten a lot stiffer in stormwater treatment. So these are actually stormwater treatment areas. So all the stormwater, including the stormwater that falls on top of the roof, has to be treated in on-site treatment systems. So all the stormwater that falls within the facility is going to head to one of these treatment zones. And that's going to be, so that, again, it's an application that has to be filed with the DEP and prove that we're meeting those standards, pretty strict standards. There's also, and look at Chip here, is it Shawbrook over here is a protected urban impaired stream. So again, the DEP is paying close attention to this, so we're not impacting that as well. So it's got the Department of Environmental Protection attention, and we're going through all the necessary design standards, environmental protection standards that we're required to do, and going up and beyond, really. And I think Craig mentioned secondary containment. The plan is, I mean, there's some tanks. Craig can talk a little bit more about the tanks, but the plan is to put secondary containment around those for any unplanned spill. But everything else is in the facility. So spills, I don't think, are a major.
And wastewater to the treatment plant.
And wastewater treatment plant, we'll go through this sewers of that.
Well, most of the wastewater is dealt with on site. But blow down, wash water, you know, and purge water. Just you have to manage salts in the digester. So most of it's on site. But yeah, the anaerobic digester is a pretty big tank in and of itself. So we have to contain in case that ruptures, things like that. But to your point, you're right. You know, we need to be good stewards of the environment, and we will publish all this, and you will hopefully be involved in the process and see that the DEQ is holding our feet to the fire that, you know, this doesn't happen.
When Craig says DEQ, he's talking DEP.
It's different than Department of Environmental Quality, that's Iowa.
One more thing on this site plan, we've identified this stream right here that qualifies under the state standards as a stream, so that, I think, connects to the watershed that you're talking about, so that all the stormwater is diverted to here.
Thank you, Debbie.
Is it a correct assumption that cat litter, which is often thrown away along with the feces, will end up in your sludge?
Actually, no. That is part of this process, the secondary screening. And what happens is from the primary trommel, it's about a 14-inch cut, and then down to about a 2.5-inch cut. That's where you get the absolute vast majority of the cat litter. We then do a separate wash step, and actually the feces is solubilized to the anaerobic digester. The residual clay depends on what you're using. We would prefer people to use paper-based, but clay is the current.
Or sawdust?
Yeah, sawdust would be great too, and it's biomass. But it is actually washed and rinsed, because if you go to some of the other IDF plants that do that exact same screening, and you identify the 2.5-inch minus screenings, which we have done in Maine, in California, in Virginia, in Iowa, that's surprisingly where most of the organics is, and it's things like that. And it's also things like food waste, like your spaghetti sauce that you scrape away, because when the cat litter goes in the same trash can, your spaghetti sauce sticks to it just as your cat does too. stuff. Sometimes there's no way to be polite in this. But that's why we actually developed this fines washing system to recover as much of the volatile organics to the digester, because there's a big uplift in gas if we did that.
Just a point, it would be really helpful if the MRC would issue specific guidelines for items like that, so that they could either be incorporated into the local ordinances, or they could be spread as informational material to people who are wondering what the hell to do with this stuff.
And, that's a good one. I brought out textiles, but it's much more than, I would much prefer to see cellulose-based cat litter. For us, so maybe we'll find a way to subsidize this
We're
stuff.
at the point now where we can do half and half,
Yeah.
and we're moving toward 100%.
Yeah.
But it's a slow process,
It is.
and sometimes it doesn't take.
Any more questions?
Yes, sir.
To that point, you mentioned compact fluorescent bulbs, and I have a sense a lot of people, you're not supposed to throw them in the trash, but a lot of people do. You mentioned that you pull them out, but I also have a sense that they go in the trash, they get compacted, they're broken. So at that point, you can't really, the mercury's already escaping.
To a certain extent, you're right. I mean, where is the mercury? It's generally in the ballast.
Yeah.
So the glass will break. All we can do is test for it. Now, the other thing is, if you design for CFLs, I'm designing for last year's trash, because now I should be designing for LEDs, because they're coming down in price so much that that's what everyone's going to be replacing their bulbs with. So then you look at what happens when everyone replaces their CFLs with LEDs, and we get 1,000 CFLs at one time. Things we have to think of, but we can continue to test for it. When TVs went flat screens, all of a sudden you had all these CRTs, and now it's going to go to LED and different things. What do you do with the plasmas? That in our system comes out on the big line. Believe me, we think about this stuff all the time. We geek out over it, but we do look at where can you get mercury from and what can we do about it.
And then you said that the mercury that you had, somehow you filter out, so when you process it, so it came out in cake form?
We have a lot of fast-moving water floating around the system. So if mercury is in liquid form, it's going to get generally carried in. And also, if you've got cellulose fibers and other things in that water, it's going to attract it. What we've been really looking for is it attaching to the cellulose fibers, which it appears not to be. So when you've got water in a system, you have to pull out the suspended solids from the water. We're after the dissolved solids. And when you're pulling out the suspended solids, those that we don't convert using enzymatic hydrolysis, ultimately it gets down to dust, particulates, silicates, things like that. That you at some point have to filter. We have a filter press and a series of ever tighter filter press. That's where it ends. It should, in theory, end up. Again, we've tested all these different points over a lot of time and really haven't found anything. But at some point we may well find something. What I'm saying is we've got these multiple opportunities to sequester it and dispose of it, and we continue to test.
And following through, when you dispose of a cake of mercury,
It's not a cake of mercury. It's a cake of, it won't
it's a
be.
cake of other things too.
Yeah, and what you do is you go to test is that above a certain level. So for disposal, and what the limits are for mercury and solid waste.
In terms of testing hazards?
I think it's probably 5 milligrams per kilogram or per liter.
So if it's below a certain point, it's fine for disposal. If it's above a certain point, we've got to dispose of it as hazardous.
If it's passes that point, so it's landfill, is it inert at that point, or if water runs through that, might that go into the groundwater?
Generally speaking, we're going to use a line landfill, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nowadays, since 1976, all new landfills had to be built with 1,000-year liners, so clay, membranes, that kind of stuff, with leachate collection.
Yeah, they have to, so the testing that Fiberight's gonna have to do is, it's a leachable test, so they determine how much mercury comes out of that waste, and it can't be above a certain level. And it would be in a help secure landfill with leachate collection, so it would be testing the leachate. And the landfills are not part of this project, they're other places for us to take.
Now, this is the same mercury though that would Burke, all of this waste that has mercury in it goes into Burke, gets burned, ends up in the ash, and gets dealt with. I mean, it doesn't go away, right?
It goes,
Or it goes into the air. I mean, we're just dealing with this, I assume it's the same mercury. Just no different.
Yeah, the fraction of mercury in the waste stream is not very large, in Maine
Right.
especially. We've got stricter rules, so,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, this seems like an improved way of dealing with that fraction that's just there.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I'm Paul Schrader, I'm here from Orono. I appreciate that you've, the consultants have come to, give their part of the answer too. This is what you provided has been presented as a peer review study. So first of all, how is it that you are peer reviewers of this? And then second of all, what's the status of the project? That's the peer project there at the university.
We are peer reviewers
Could you
because
speak up just a little bit? I've been having
Yeah.
trouble hearing you.
MRC came to us asking us to do peer review. My understanding is because we are chemical engineers, we understand process engineering, and several of the steps that are there in blue and green is traditional chemical engineering process. And we know how to evaluate those processes and give technical opinion on it. So that's how we became peer reviewer. Secondly, we were familiar with what Old Town Fuel and Fiber was trying to do in terms of trying to make sugars from woody biomass. And because one of the product here was going to be industrial sugars, we had a lot more experience in somebody trying to take waste woody biomass and turning it into